This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
You gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
But remember what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Greetings, one and all. Lembit Öpik here on Lembit Öpik Live, unprecedented TV at your service, the home of free speech all around the world. Big thank you if you're one of the people who subscribes. If not, then do please like and subscribe us on unprecedented TV on YouTube. We are about to start a vast expansion of the station in January and February 2026. If you're watching this live, you can be part of it. If you want to advertise on the station, then do get in touch. We're getting everything in place, and I want to thank you for all the support that you've given us in 2025. Obviously, you can go into the archive, and it's fun to do that, to look at the predictions we've made on our shows and see how many of them have come true. Most of them have, actually. So I don't want to become hubristic or self-satisfied about it, because you're only as good as your last show. But I do feel that we've more or less got it right in terms of the facts, and maybe some of our opinions have also come to pass. Do please tell other people about us as well. We've got some great shows coming up. Marcus Papadopoulos is joining us with a wonderful show, In Good Faith, which looks at the world from a faith perspective, not the same as a religious perspective. He talks to people who have direct or indirect interaction with faith, and sometimes they've got a lot of critical things to say about churches and similar things like that as well. Fascinating series. And we've got lots more as well. Marilyn Hawes is with us now, and she's doing some fantastic work. But anyway, instead of advertising those, find them for yourself by subscribing on Unprecedented TV. We've also got some outside broadcasts planned for next year, as early as January, once again, if you're watching live, and more on that to come. For today, I want to talk about a developing story. The European Union has decided to lend 90,000 million euros to Volodymyr Zelensky's Ukraine war effort. Oh yes, after lots of wrangling and meeting after meeting after meeting, the coalition of the willing, if that's really what they want to be called, seems very good at talking, not so good at winning wars. Well, they've decided to loan 90 billion euros to Zelensky. And that apparently is going to alter the course of the war. But why are they doing it? Are they right to do it? What are the implications? As often is the case, we go to our man with his finger on the military button, and he used to have his finger on the trigger. It's former sniper Warren Thornton. Warren, good to see you. How have you been?
I am absolutely fine, Lembit. How are you?
Not bad at all, though I have to say I'm troubled by this 90 billion euro proposal, and it's been all over the press recently. There's one of the headlines there. Can we just get a clear view of that, please, guys? Thank you very much. EU agrees hefty $105 billion Ukraine loan without using Russian assets. EU leaders decide to borrow cash to fund Ukraine's defense rather than use frozen Russian money, as diplomats said. Now, my understanding is that the European Union has decided to lend Zelensky money. Quite a courageous thing to do, considering the various, let's say, fraud problems that Ukraine has had. But they've decided to lend it because they couldn't get agreement. So what is this deal about, Warren? And why didn't they use the Russian assets, which they were talking about using?
Okay, so let's get into the frozen Russian assets, first of all. Very simply, Belgium put their foot down. They absolutely refused to budge. That might be the end of Bart de Wever. The EU will be keen to get rid of him because, of course, he didn't, and quite rightly so, turn around and said they were not using the frozen Russian assets that are in Euroclear. it would have been the end of Euroclear. People would have pulled their money out. Euroclear would have gone bankrupt. Other people, as I say, would have pulled their money out. Euroclear would have gone bankrupt. And, of course, Belgium would have suffered hugely because of that. And, of course, the EU would have then just turned around and said, well, we didn't turn around and say yes. You were the ones who said yes eventually, and the EU would have walked away. They asked the EU for guarantees. The EU refused to give them. In my view there, Belgium were perfectly right and it was perfectly acceptable to turn around. And despite the rest of the world saying, don't do this, they were very much, the EU wanted to go ahead. Then we had this ridiculous meeting, Lembit, between Ursula von der Leyen and the rest of the EU, where she said, we're not leaving this room until we get agreement to somehow give money to the Ukraine, which I thought was absolutely bizarre. It was literally like holding a gun to their head, Lembit.
Yeah, this is one of the pictures, I think, from that meeting. The EU plans to raise 90 billion euros in joint debt for Ukraine, and here's how. What was this meeting actually arguing about? Why did Belgium say no? And I'm guessing, I'm sure, in fact, that Hungary's Viktor Orban also said no, wasn't interested in it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, everybody was advising that it wasn't a good idea. And then Orban, of course, turned around and said, no, it's not a good idea. Serbia turned around and said it's not a good idea. The Czechs were very reticent about it. Italy were very reticent about it. Even the USA turned around and said it's a terrible idea. So, of course, there was no real support for this. And there were other countries turning around and saying, we're not going to be part of this. So what you had then was, if you then didn't get them all together in a room and say, OK, we're not going to touch the Russian assets, you weren't able to lock all the other countries into repaying or paying this money to keep Ukraine afloat, which they say is going to keep Ukraine afloat for 2 years. The total cost of it, according to our very good friends in the city, is going to be around about 130 billion when it's all added up and all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. But the problem that we have here is Ukraine do not have to pay this back. People are calling it a loan. It's actually debt, and it's going to be passed on to the likes of you and me. Okay,
so why is anyone saying that it's going to be paid back? It's fairly obviously not.
No, it is going to be paid back, of course, when Russia give war reparations. Now, Russia are not no intention of giving any war reparations whatsoever, because as we've shown in videos before, when the Russians take an area, they then rebuild it. Mariupol looks quite beautiful. The problem is, of course, the Russians are going to turn around and go, winners don't pay war reparations. That's not how it works. Losers are the ones who end up paying out. And, of course, the banks come in and take their slice, and then they say, we can help you rebuild. And then, of course, they own you economically for decades to come. And this is where Ukraine are, I'm afraid. And, of course, the EU, whatever is left of Ukraine when they come with a peace deal, and we are no closer to that, whatever is left of Ukraine, of course, will be solely owned by the EU. They will want their pound of flesh, and so will the bank.
And this is the thing. I don't trust Ursula von der Leyen on the right there at all. She still hasn't answered questions about her involvement in what looks like dodgy dealing over COVID, but that's for another day. It feels to me this is expansionism by the European Union, ironically.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And the problem that we've got is who do you want to sell your soul to? Zelensky sold his soul originally to the Americans. Then he sold his soul to the EU. And the one person he should have been cozying up to, that he said he was going to cozy up to, that he was going to be peaceful with, that he was going to have a dialogue with, and everything was going to be fine. When you look back on the archives, he said he was going to be, the reason he got in, he was going to make peace with Russia.
So what changed?
Very simply, the IMF, at the very start, the IMF decided they were going to give Ukraine a huge loan to try and prize them away from Russia. And of course, at the time, the Ukrainian government decided they were going to go with a $15 billion loan from Russia and the cheap natural gas. Now, of course, everybody's paying for that, shall we say, hubristic overthrow of the democratically elected Ukrainian government.
Now, we've got a man who I'm just not fond of. Regular viewers know this. It's Mark Rutte. Mark Rutte is the main officer, I don't know, what do you call him, apparatchik operative of NATO, but he doesn't impress me at all. And he seems to still be saying that the best form of defence is being able to have massive lethal force and to kill people. But he's odd. He's an odd character. Now, it's not his children. He hasn't got any children, as far as I know, so he's got no stake in the game in terms of sending his kids to the front line. What do you make of him? Because he's obviously pushing for all this money, 5% of gross domestic product going into the war effort. But I just don't have faith in him. I don't think he's a credible character.
Nobody should. He wasn't credible, of course, in his own country. Most of the people absolutely detested him. Now, Ruti Fruity has come out and said that everybody's got to pay a certain amount of money and everything else. That's not going to happen. France and Turkey have never even paid the 2%, let alone the 5% that he's asking for. And of course, he's turning around and saying, we're going to do this with weapons and we're going to do that and we're going to build up the military ready for a go in 2030. You're not going to get anywhere near, because very simply, if they want to keep this war going in Ukraine, every single item that they make, they're going to have to send to Ukraine. And the problem that we have, of course, there are people coming out with fantastical figures, like we'll have 200 long-range missiles. Well, how are you going to get those? You're going to get them from America. They only build 50 a year, so you're going to have those over the course of 4 years. The Russians can build 50 of those in a month. It is quite unbelievable. This is the ludicrous stupidity of the West, and we have never been governed by such a bunch of incompetent, shall we say, idiots. I mean, there is a joke going around, Lembit, that we don't tell jokes in the UK anymore. We just elect them to Parliament.
Well, I wasn't even going to go into Starmer. I think he's irrelevant to this whole thing.
Yes.
He doesn't have any influence. His coalition of the willing, whatever happened to that? It's gone. Or at least stalled. Now, I'm wondering if maybe we'll come back to that Mark Rutte character. It just gives me the creeps, he really does. But there's just all the time when I watch this kind of thing, I've got this feeling that we're surrounded by really questionable characters who have their own agendas, and you've got this Zelensky popping up all the time. You know, there he is, one left, brought EU side back to Ukraine, divisions clear. Once again, this man, and we've got to remember, his trade is not politics. His trade is being a clown. He's a professional clown, comedian, joker. That's how he made his living. And then he became the president of Ukraine. This man, I just don't have any faith in.
No,
Tell me why anyone believes that he's a good war leader.
Well, nobody does, let's face it. What happened here? And let's be brutally honest about what happened. Zelensky, put in by Olomoisky, who was an oligarch in the first place, and of course, he is, ended up going to jail. Zelensky has thrown numerous people under the bus when they failed. The Americans are not fond of Zelensky either. They know they can work with him, but he's just a useful fool as far as they're concerned. The EU need him in place, and of course, should he be replaced, then the British will want Zelensky to go in there, who they've been grooming as the UK ambassador from Ukraine for a couple of years. Zelensky's not that keen, for the simple fact that he knows what happens at the end, that eventually you're going to get yours. And eventually Ukraine is going to become shall we say, a rump state with no seacoast, because there's no way in God's green earth that Putin's going to allow him to keep hold of Odessa now. And I'm predicting this, Odessa will end up in the Russian hands, simply because of everything that's been going on with the tankers. But going back to what you were saying here, you are absolutely right. We have never been in such a worse state. And when you were talking about the money in the original loan, we are potless. This is the reason we wanted to take the Russian assets. This is the reason it's only 90 billion over 2 years. And in the end, this isn't going to keep Ukraine afloat for 6 months, considering what you have to pay for various vehicles. And the state of our militaries is absolutely shocking. Look at the Ajax, for instance, this wonderful...
Ajax, that cleans the toilet, doesn't it? Ajax.
Yeah, the Ajax is this new armoured personnel carrier that everybody said is going to be the next generation thing. There are many, many soldiers that have suffered all sorts of hearing problems, eyesight problems, brain problems, where they've had where they've come out, they've vomited and everything else. And of course, everybody is still doing tests on this. So it's been put back over and over and over again. It's now a multi-billion-pound investment in something that clearly has problems. And this is the root cause that we have. And you hear the Russians go on about root causes, but we've got root causes of our own. Our military is massively overpriced. It doesn't work properly. And the Russians can make twice as much, or even 3 or 4 or even 5 times as much, and they can make it a quarter of the cost.
Okay, so we've got problems in our own sourcing. We'll talk about that after the break. Story so far then, 90 billion euros. I just want to get this bit out of the way. You're saying it's going to last half a year. Now,
yes.
I've done some figures on this myself, and it looks like it costs 300 to 500 million euros a day for Zelensky to fight his failed front. I mean, he's losing. And so let's say if it's 500 million, 450 million, let's say, make it easy for the figures. That's 200 days, just over half a year.
Yep.
Well, why is anyone pretending this is going to keep them going for 2 years?
Well, they're all saying this is going to be for infrastructure, Lembit. And of course, this is going to keep the electricity grid and everything on. Well, the Russians keep smashing it every day. They're in the process of smashing Odessa as we speak. And of course, they'll just keep smashing the infrastructure, keep smashing the railways, keep smashing the electric. They'll keep having to fork out for that. And God knows how much of that money will then actually get spent on weapons. Remember that loan, Lembit, and this is something that nobody is talking about. Remember, they already gave them a 40 billion euro loan. Well, that money is coming out as well. So it's only going to be 50 billion in the end. Everybody's forgetting that little part. And of course, once that money then gets diluted down, it gets sent to various companies, shall we say, for buying weapons that are never going to turn up for the next 9 months. Then, of course, they're going to get more and more into debt. And of course, then when that money does turn up in Ukraine, how much of that is going to be siphoned off by the various people who have been siphoning off this money? And we're not just talking about the very top. We're talking it's corrupt all the way through the levels. So in the end, they're going to end up with about 30 billion of that, of which about 15 billion of that will actually see the light of day. And we'll be right back where we started from. Pretty
grim scenario. Stay with us. You're watching me, Lembit Öpik, here on Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV as we explore what's going to happen to the 90,000 million euros which the European Union has decided to lend to Zelensky. I want to talk more about the corruption after the break. I want to remind you, though, that Tim Scott Uncancelled here. He is fantastic. Doing a news review, covering stories you may not have seen with his usual vim and verve. Watch this. Great value every time. Do go back to the archive. It stands the test of time. Like honey, it'll last forever, as will Warren Thornton. Warren, thanks for joining us today to talk about this rather vexing situation. I want to talk about the problems that the British Army has, the Ajax. They're depending on Ajax, and I think we've got a picture of it. How can this win us a war?
You absolutely can't. But what it can do is clean up the corruption. The problem that we have.
That's very good. That's very good in front of a live studio audience.
It is one of those. Gets absolutely anything off, Lembit.
Might have been this one you were talking about.
Yeah.
Tell us, how much does something like that cost to design and what's wrong with it?
Well, the problem is they've already put 6 billion into this, which is not meant to cost anywhere near this. There have been delays for over a year now. There have been various reports of people feeling very, very ill when taking part in it. There are problems with the eardrums. There are problems with dental work. There are problems, they believe, with people coming out of these and vomiting and being sick. At least 17 soldiers have reported real serious problems that they've had with these. And of course, that's going to be kept hidden the long term, because at the end of the day, we've been pouring money down what you might call an enormous white elephant.
But the good news is that the other Ajax is only, I don't know if we're going to get that up again. That's only, oh, there we are, thank you. That's about £7.50. Maybe they should just stick with that. Anyway, enough of the jocularity. Let's get back to what you were talking about before. That Mark Rutte fellow endlessly telling us that we have to get more investment into war. I just find it so frustrating. There he is again. It's always the same. Lethal force is going to stop Russia. Russia is a big threat. Russia's going to invade Europe. It's not, is it?
No, Russia isn't going to invade Europe. But of course, this makes two things very, very easy. He knows full well that Russia is not going to invade Europe. And even if it did, we'd be pretty powerless to stop them. Russia have got no need to do that whatsoever. They've got their own problems and they're dealing with them. They don't want a bar of Europe. And of course, Europe don't want to negotiate with them. So why would the Russians even bother? They just want to make their borders secure. They want NATO out of the way. And of course, as far as they're concerned, remember that Rutte is the follow-on from Stoltenberg. Now, Stoltenberg was the NATO general. He was the one who turned around and said there's no such thing. They made no such agreement for NATO not to move east, which he was lying through his teeth. And you didn't think Rutte could be any worse, Lembit, but it turned out that he was. And here's the problem that Mark Rutte has, is he has to bang this narrative out, because we need to keep the war in Ukraine going, because we are stony broke. So therefore, we need the Americans and everybody else to believe, so we can keep pouring more money into this ridiculous black hole. And of course, we need to, at the end of the day, the NATO general is there to keep the arms companies going well. And of course, when he's finished, he'll do the same as Stoltenberg. He'll find himself a nice little job somewhere as an envoy or a spokesperson for some military industrial complex job that he gets. But the problem also that we have with Mark Rutte is he has literally sold should we say, Europe down the river, because now they're going to buy American weapons, which aren't ready. The American weapons are just as bare in the cupboard as is everybody else's. And of course, we're paying twice as much or three times as much for them. So we've been sold down the river, Lembit.
Now, the European Union isn't really particularly aligned on this. Viktor Orban, who we may see in a minute or two, he just calls the idea stupid. Yes. And I like him because he just treats Vladimir Putin for what he is, a human being with a lot of authority and a vested interest in protecting Russian interests. Now, you can agree or disagree with his methodology, but I don't think Vladimir Putin intends to invade and conquer France, Poland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Frankly, if it turns out that I'm wrong, then that woman there may be proven right. But I just don't believe it. And therefore, we're all being sold down the river by these pontificating, lightweight politicians. And then you've got Viktor Orban from Hungary, who completely disagrees. And what do they say? People like her, people like von der Leyen say, oh, well, remove the vote then, if he doesn't agree with this or that.
Yes, it's not very far removed from what they used to do in 1930s Germany. And of course, Orban was a man who came out and said that the man from 1930s Germany and, of course, Napoleon couldn't conquer Russia. But, of course, Kaya Kallis is going to do it, no problem at all. And, of course,
there is. The whole idea is a stupid one, he says. There are two countries which are in war. And it's not the European Union. Russia and Ukraine and somebody in the European Union would like to take away the money of one of the war's parties and then give it to another one. It's marching into the war. I mean, I think he's completely right. And I really like the way he talks. There's Benz, Mertz, sorry. I always call him Benz. I call him Benz on your show, I think. Actually, it's Mertz. I always think of him as Mercedes-Benz. But he's so inept, in my view. I'm not sure if I'd like to talk about other countries' leaders, but they talk about ours. We're just looking at a bunch of very poor politicians here. Go on.
You're absolutely right, Lembit. I mean, Mertz is literally is less popular than a certain gentleman in the 1930s. And that tells you something. Macron is the least popular French president ever. Starmer's ratings are absolutely in the toilet. And these are the people that are expecting you to sign up for conscription to go and fight for them. They couldn't fight for the people of their own countries. Why on earth would anybody sign up to go and fight for them?
Who in Britain would say, I'm going to go and fight for Starmer? Churchill, I get. For some people, Thatcher, I get. But Starmer? Come on, and Rutte. Go on.
But it's absolute nonsense, you see, because they're coming out with this war rhetoric. You've got Rutte, you've got Starmer, you've got Macron, you've got Merz. Where are you getting the equipment from? Germany can't keep the lights on or the electric on long enough to build anything. Half their everything that they've built is decimated. British steel is splashed to the four winds. France don't build anything of any great substance anymore. It would take them ages and ages and ages to build, one or two of these items or whatever. And of course, they have no money to be able to build. So they're in between a rock and a hard place. They're talking war when they should be talking jaw. But they are literally, they're going to the cupboard and they're going, look, we've got all these shiny new weapons, and the cupboard is actually bare. And the more they borrow, the more rubbish they build, and the worse it gets. And
Zelensky's full of words. He's actually not that interesting a speaker, but he says stuff like this: Europe's decision to provide 90 billion euros is a financial security guarantee for Ukraine. Now, we noticed this line. He's trying to get into this security guarantee phraseology. President Zelensky stated that the allocation of a 90 billion euro interest-free loan to Ukraine for 2 years is a real financial security guarantee. It's not an interest-free loan. We're picking up the tab for that. Other people are picking up the tab. The funds will be dispersed at 45 billion euros annually for 2 years and will be repaid from Russian assets. It's ridiculous. 45 billion a year. That basically buys you 100 days.
Lembit, 40 billion of that has got to go back to the European Union.
I didn't know that, actually. So actually, are you sure about that?
Yes, I'm absolutely positive. The European Union gave them a 40 billion loan, and the banks want their money back. So the 90 billion loan, there's only going to be 5 billion left of that. And by the time, of course, everybody's had their little cut out of that, there's going to be almost nothing left.
No, hang on, 55. No, if they owe, how much do they owe? 40 billion?
They owe 40 billion.
Well, then 50 billion will be left over, but that buys you 100 days, 110 days.
But you can't have that until next year, Lembit, because it's only 45 billion a year, remember?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. No, you said, okay, well, I haven't checked. We haven't had time to check those figures up. But what I do want to talk about is Zelensky's massive corruption problem. Because we're not, you implied it in the first half of the show, we're not just giving this money to a saint. We're giving this money to a guy that even his own people don't trust. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you've got almost every single person that's in Zelensky's cabinet is being investigated. There are 80 politicians in Ukraine that are being members of parliament that are being investigated for corruption. Not only that, you've not only got the Ukrainian corruption where people have got massive sports cars in Monaco and everything else. And of course, Zelensky's wife, who managed to get a nice Gucci $45,000 handbag. And of course, we've also got the arms companies, 770 million in missing arms from contracts that were meant to be honoured that haven't done so.
Well, his own people don't trust him. We found a headline here: nearly 60% of Ukrainians see Zelensky as responsible for his associates' role in major corruption scandal. Poll shows that was just very recent. If you're watching this live, so even in Ukraine, they don't believe he's honest.
Well, I'm not surprised. Let's face it, he had a company that he ran with a guy called Mindich, called Kvartal 95, which Mindich then left, and there was lots of, shall we say, accounts in the Seychelles and everything else. Mindich is now domiciled in Israel, wanted for corruption. Dmitry Umarov is literally doesn't want to go anywhere whatsoever, and in fact tried to negotiate with the Americans.
Who's Umarov?
Umarov is the defense minister, and of course he was removed, and he tried to negotiate with the Americans that all past sins would be forgiven. So basically, that was going to be part of the package. that anything carried out by the Ukrainian government was null and void up until that point. So, in other words, all the corruption that we've done up to now, forget all about it. We'll be good from now on, I promise. And remember, Lembit, that NABU was set up by the Americans to make sure that the money went to the right places and not into the pockets of the politician.
What's NABU?
NABU is the anti-corruption that was set up by the Americans to make sure that the money went where the Americans wanted it to go, rather than where the Ukrainians wanted it to go. And Zelensky tried to bring that under his government's control. So basically, they wanted to steal the money from the people who were stealing.
And now you've got this situation where 6 out of 10 Ukrainians think he's responsible for his own colleagues' role in corruption. It's quite obvious that people suspect that Zelensky's corrupt. Now, it hasn't been proven, but he does need to give some reassurance for this reason. Why would the West carry on shoveling billions of euros and pounds and dollars to a man who looks shifty?
Well, let me ask you a question here, Lembit, because when everybody, remember that the Ukrainian media and everything else, everything in Ukraine is kept afloat by the West. So the Ukrainian media are absolutely owned. So when the Ukraine media are asking those questions, they're being prompted to do so by the people who fund them. And that's where we bump into a problem, Lembit, because obviously the money that was in Ukraine was meant to go in various directions. Now, we don't know whose pockets they were going in, but we can safely assume they weren't going into Zelensky's and everybody else. And it's sort of, how can I put this? It's don't touch our slice of the pie, because we can obviously cut you off and we can slice you up into little pieces. And this is exactly what has happened to Zelensky. Remember, Lembit, that there was uncontrolled and totally out of control corruption in Ukraine for 3 years. Then suddenly we want to know where the money's gone, what Zelensky has done with it, but we are still funding him. And that is the thing that gets you. We're not funding him as much, Lembit, but of course, when you look at everything that is behind this, of course, this is a massive laundrette, and it's not just Zelensky that's doing it.
There's one beneficiary of all this mess, of course, and arguably, and that would be Vladimir Putin, who has been fairly clear and I think fairly consistent. He had this big press conference recently, if you're watching this live, and he more or less said, look, I'll achieve my goals, various ways of doing it. If Europe wants a war, I don't want a war with them. If they want to fight with me, I'll do it, but I don't really want to do it. And I think that this is kind of an interesting aspect to the whole thing, that Vladimir Putin is often accused of being intransigent, inflexible, not changing his demands. Of course he doesn't need to change his demands. He doesn't want to change his demands because his demands have been consistent from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been utterly consistent, and Ukraine have flip-flopped and America have flip-flopped. 1 minute they're going to give Putin some of what he wants, and of course Putin has to make concessions. Let's be absolutely clear here. Winners don't have to make concessions. You have two choices: obliteration or negotiation. If you don't want to negotiate, and when the negotiating terms come in, 9 times out of 10, you're negotiating a surrender. Now, America do want to get out of this with as much grace as possible. They sent Kellogg over to negotiate. Kellogg is 100% on the Ukrainian side. Then they sent Witkoff over because obviously the hard line didn't work. Witkoff was somewhat softer, but then, of course, Marco Rubio took over, and we all know that he's a hardliner and probably the most dangerous man in the American government. And the problem that we have here is the Russians have been utterly consistent. They have seen this time and time again from the Americans. They've seen it time and time again from the Ukrainians, and they're not being fooled by any of it. And they are turning around and saying, this are the 3 things that we wanted, and unless they're achieved, we are not doing anything whatsoever. And as for a ceasefire, we tried that before, and you just armed and you went again. So it's not happening. This is what's going to happen. And if you don't, then we will carry on achieving our military aims on the battlefield.
Yeah, Vladimir Putin was, I didn't watch all of it, but I watched quite a lot of it. And can we put that back up just so that we can watch it? He comes across as a statesman. Whether you
Yes.
like him or not, this is a slick operation. 4.5 hours he kept going. He wasn't using a script. I doubt whether he had it all written down. I didn't feel like he did. And he's together. And when you compare him to Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Kaya Callas, sorry to say, because I know her dad and he's a very decent guy, and all of these other people, he's just in a different league. And also, he's got a very effective military. He didn't work as a professional comedian before becoming head of Russia. All the cards are in his favour. Why would he stop?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being funny when you consider the people he's had to deal with. Look at who was the foreign secretary for a while, David Lammy. He probably thinks that Catherine the Great followed Catherine the fairly average. You know what I mean? He's seen him on Mastermind. And he's just it's an absolute joke. There is nobody that is anywhere near. Orban would be near. And I have huge respect now for De Wever of Belgium. The tiny little Belgium stand their ground against the rest of the EU took some doing. And of course, we can say that Bart De Wever is probably up there. Orban's very much up there. Putin's up there. There are as many people up there. And of course, I think that Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban, and of course, you look at Lavrov, and they're miles ahead of anybody else. That's the problem. And of course, we've got a major problem in the fact that we don't have anybody in the West, even remotely close to matching them. And we don't have anybody in America either, really. At the end of the day, we're sending over realtors, real estate people, to negotiate with career diplomats. I think we may have lost a bit there for a second. So I will carry on just in case it's not me. Very, very simply, what we have, as I say, is when we look at all the people that have been pushed forward into this. Keith Kellogg, his daughter runs an NGO/charity for literally sending these sending American soldiers who are fighting in Ukraine against the Russians, sending back the dead bodies of these soldiers. So she doesn't have any attempt whatsoever.
Zelensky's not having a very good time with Donald Trump, is he? He's completely fed up with Zelensky, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely he is. And the problem that we have, of course, with Zelensky, of course, is that Trump doesn't trust him anymore. Rubio is the only one who's backing in his corner. Witkoff and Kushner don't really want anything to do with him. They don't want anything to do with Merz either. When they went to Berlin for the talk, they didn't really want Merz in the room because they thought he would be, how can I put it, and have a negative attitude. So, of course, but the trouble is that we have with this Lembit, the Americans and the Russians start to make some progress. Then they go and listen. Then they go and talk to Zelensky. They go and talk to the Europeans. Marco Rubio goes with them. And by the time we get back to the New Deal or whatever deal they've thrashed out, it is completely changed. And of course, the Russians have never changed their attitude or what they're going to do and what they want from this special military operation. They entered this SMO or war or whatever you want to call it, conflict, with 3 goals in mind. Until they achieve those goals, they are not going to stop. You're not going to stop them with force. So you have to negotiate. And the massive problem that we have is the Americans and the Europeans and Zelensky are still trying to negotiate as though they have some say in the matter.
Yeah, well, I think that Donald Trump does have some say because he wants to do business with Putin. That's obvious. Not with Zelensky, with Putin. Zelensky's disgraced himself, I think. I have my own private views about why. I have my guesses about what is wrong with Zelensky, but that doesn't matter for right now. Looking ahead then, what is going to happen? Is Donald Trump going to be able to do a deal with Putin regardless of all this squirming and whinging and moaning and bickering by the Europeans?
No, the odds are too great against him. So basically what's happened is Dmitriev, who is talking on behalf of the Russians, flew to Washington, first of all, for a secret meeting. Then he went down to Miami. Everybody thinks he went straight to Miami, but he didn't. And he was carrying a message from Putin. And the message was, and we have this from somebody who's very, very close to Peskov, who is the spokesman for Vladimir Putin. If the situation is exactly the same, then, of course, there's no point us having any more dialogue. Now, Washington assured Dmitriev that the situation had changed. And of course, the Americans have been very disingenuous here because the Kellogg plan is still in place, but it has altered. It's altered more towards the Ukrainians. The Russians are just not going to have a bar of this, Lembit. So we're going to be back to square one.
And we got Rutte, finished it with him. Devastating consequences, he warns of. What does he mean? What devastating consequences? It's just like a 15-year-old who says, I'm going to move out if you don't give me more pocket money, Dad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those. He'll have to go and see Daddy because without Daddy, they can't do anything.
Oh, yeah, he did. He said that thing, didn't he? About, oh, that's
He
right.
did,
Yeah. He's the daddy. Oh, man, the awkwardness of that phrase.
Yeah, he called Trump Daddy, and without Daddy, they've got no chance. They're like yapping chihuahuas. This is a fully functioning, very battle-hardened military we're talking about here against people who have diversity, the HMS diversity inclusion and safe rooms and things like that, and admirals who wear skirts, who say that they're men. This is an absolute nonsense. They are battle-hardened. The Ukrainians are the second most battle-hardened group of people in the entirety of Europe or the Western Hemisphere, and they are getting slaughtered. What chance, genuinely, do you think we would have fighting a war in Russia? NATO, Mark Rutte, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, they're happy talking a good game, but when it comes to putting boots on the ground, they haven't done it in 3 years. They're not going to do it now.
NATO chief warns of devastating consequences. I find that absolutely empty bluster. Of course, if you keep crying wolf to someone like Putin, he'll catch on pretty quickly. I have to say, I had never really paid much attention to previous heads of NATO, but he just takes the biscuit in terms of his, I don't know, his childish superficiality.
Lembit, there's empty rhetoric coming out. You have to remember that the area that Russia would have taken, and people go, oh, they're not moving anywhere. If you literally turned the area that Ukraine have into the UK, they would be up at Edinburgh, okay? And that would then be, let's put it this way, that's not Edinburgh that is going to be occupied for like 2 or 3 years. You're talking the whole of the British Isles up to Edinburgh, and that is now going to stay in Russian hands. So people who talk all this empty nonsense about Russia have gone nowhere, they're achieving nothing, they're talking absolute nonsense.
The route a 3-layer security guarantee for Ukraine. It's like cloud cuckoo land, really.
This is the same thing, Lembit. I'm sorry, but they've literally turned around and said that Ukraine want to have an 800,000 force of men. They haven't even got that to carry on the battle with. They never had that in the first place. At the start of the SMO, they had 82,000, and then it went up because of obviously the summer offensive and everything, and they drafted everybody into the military. They haven't got 800,000 troops left, so they would have to have them from other places, and Zelensky's already admitted it. Where they're going to get them from? Non-NATO countries. You can bet your bottom dollar they're all countries that are, shall we say, friendly towards America or towards Great Britain. And of course, the Russians aren't going to have that for a second.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Obviously, we play part of your show here on Unprecedented TV, usually at 11 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Where can people get more of Warren Thornton?
Well, they can come across to warrenthornton.com. And of course, we are absolutely eternally grateful that we have our part of our show is on Unprecedented. You want to watch the videos that we can't show on mainstream media, then warrenthornton.com, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on a Sunday with the wonderful and erudite Lembit Öpik.
There'll always be a part of you that has to be behind that paywall. Thank you so much. That is Warren Thornton, who's given us good insight there. Have your say. You may disagree, of course, but that's your call. Still interested to know what you have to say about this either way. And don't forget, we've got lots of other shows as well. And very soon, we're going to start our arts and culture stream. That's not to be missed. So thank you so much to Warren Thornton. Thank you very much to you for watching. And thanks to the team. I'm Lembit Öpik. This is Lembit Öpik Live. If you'd like to advertise on the station, please go ahead. Do like and do subscribe to Unprecedented TV on YouTube. we're here as the home of free speech. Thank you very much for watching.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.